So I watched a video the other day, and I've been working with fascia for quite a while now. If you've never heard of the term fascia, it kind of sounds like the whole Dutch thing from Austin Powers, fascia, but it's spelled F-A-S-C-I-A. I am your fascia. So, sorry for the accent. Fascia, oh God. Fascia, now I'm gonna start saying that to clients. Your fascia, no, your father's fine. Your fascia is a connective tissue, a web-like woven substance. So if you look at this, it's woven in, yeah? Everything you pull on, if I pull on over here, it happens, pull over here, it starts to tug, I mean. So what is fascia? Fascia is a connective tissue, okay? Now this connective tissue is almost like what connects the skin to the underlying muscle, to the underlying, or then from the muscle to the tendon to the bone. Every tendon is like the end of a bundle, like a candy wrapper. If you can imagine a candy wrapper, literally twist the candy wrapper, and the ends of those, which would be like a tendon of a muscle. If you look at the bicep brachii muscle, for example, the ends of them, where the tendons are, just the end bundles, but wrapped, the whole candy wrapper is wrapped around and also interwoven inside that muscle fiber, and every single muscle fiber has a bag of fascia around it. And there's a lot of research now showing that there's fascia just literally everywhere. Tissues don't separate unless there's some sort of, as soon as it comes apart, you'll notice that there's like this web. A really amazing video, the video that really kind of changed the way I look at fascia altogether. Not only from certain books, but the video itself was called Strolling Under the Skin, I believe. Strolling Under the Skin, I found it on YouTube. It's about 28 minutes long or something like that. But for those of you that really wanted to see what that looks like, even just watch 5 minutes of it just to see what that looks like, it's kind of mind-blowing to think that fascia, the reason I'm so obsessed with it, because it started off as connective tissue to me. And I was like, okay, looking at the body through the physical world, or looking as a therapist through the physical body, and finding out that our bodies are not made of just stuff, just physical things. It's also made of atoms and light and non-physical things that also make up these things. Like there's a field between every person that we don't really know what is there because we can't really see it. And just because we can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. So for example, Wi-Fi, any other signal that you see, you don't see those things, and if you did, we'd probably go crazy. If we had the antenna to actually see signals, everything would be changing and colors would be everywhere, and you wouldn't be able to survive. But it doesn't mean that those things aren't there. Like X-rays, gamma rays, there's light spectrums that we just don't see. And there's also these non-physical things in the body that we're still trying to discover, and everybody's still trying to discover. But the concept of fascia, the reason I'm talking about all this whole light thing is because light gets transmitted through this stuff, almost like fiber optic cables. Fiber optic cables was invented a certain amount of years ago, and the electricity was used, and that was at a certain speed. But once they created fiber optics, light began traveling at an incredible speed, and information became transmitted and traveled through this medium in such an incredible way. Light transmits through fiber optic cables at the speed of light. The point is, I'm talking about like a knee injury. A knee injury, when something happens or when you get scared, the body tenses up. And what makes that tense up? How does that communication happen so that right away when something happens, boom, you just want to tense up right away? A lot of us believe that it's muscle, but what we're finding now, what I'm learning about now is this fascia is not only just this connective tissue, but it's also a communicator with the brain directly, and it sends this light transmission right to the spot, immediately tenses up the area. And it tenses up every single muscle fiber and everything in between it. And it's just amazing how this can go almost untalked about, unnoticed in a lot of school systems and a lot of practices, especially when it comes to physical therapy, because there's not a lot of understanding for it, and there's not a lot of application to see how to maybe make a change in somebody's body using fascia. A lot of my treatments, the ones that are really effective anyways, if you want a general treatment, a general massage or a general like overall stretch, that works for a certain amount of time. But if you don't address fascia, I find that musculoskeletal injuries don't heal the same way, for myself anyways. I've tried to rehab my knee for a while, and it wasn't until I started doing fascia things like cupping. This is what cupping is in the West anyways. In the East, they use fire, and a lot of places out here, they still use fire apparently. I've actually seen that, which is incredible, and one day maybe I'll learn that, but for now, I got a pump. Super simple. Okay, so what this is doing, pretty incredible. It doesn't seem like much, but if we're talking about connective tissue, right? That fascia, when it gets dry, it tends to get sticky because it's already in this glue-like sticky substance that kind of molds and holds and pulls and moves. And as you move the muscle underneath the tendon, it also needs to conform and move with you. And then when you come back, it also comes back, like it also goes back to normal form. So it's very elastic because it's the connection between all the things in the body, the thing that surgeons tend to usually cut through and kind of need to bypass. We can start understanding how to manipulate it and how to communicate with it. That's another thing that I'm learning is how to train through fascia. I've always mentioned like training through the functional planes and the functional lines of the body, which have tremendously changed the way that my body is moving and the way that I recover. And my fascia seems to be lit up. When you see somebody that's bright, when you see somebody that's glowing, their skin is glowing, or they say you light up the room, there's always a question of why. Are you just healthier? Have you eaten more like vegetables? Like, what is it? Are you more hydrated? What exactly is that causing that person that's brighter? Now, a lot of that could be the fascia is actually healthy, and fascia shoots light through it. And that's how body communicates with joints and how things shiver and how things contract and how things move. I mean, that's why a lot of injuries are really hard for you to see them. Some people come in for a shoulder x-ray and the doctor says, we don't really see anything. Let's call it soft tissue damage. Another really cool tool I have for fascia is these guys. This looks like the bat tool. This is another form of the tool. I have about 6 of those type of tools. So, fascia, why is it important? Well, have you ever heard of plantar fasciitis? Headaches, tension, anything that's creating tension in the body. Low back pain, usually low back pain is a fascia issue. This certification that you're seeing right here is actually a fascial stretch therapy certification, so I know how to stretch the whole body in a way that addresses fascia specifically, and it works with your nervous system, so there's a lot of gentle movements, but also taking you through a certain range of motion at a certain level. Once I mix that with how I treat with cupping, mix that with how I treat with some of these tools, you can become pretty good at addressing the actual fascial layer. There's deep levels of this fascia. There's a superficial fascia, there's a deep fascia. Going back to where I started from, the connection between you and I, the connection between everything that we see, the space between us and the sun, that has something to it where information gets traveled and sent through that. That's what the internet really is. The internet is like the fascia of our humanity and our society at the moment, because it's an interconnected woven web where you can message somebody here, but that message also gets sent to those and everything's already intermingled and connected. That's what fascia really is. It's an interconnected source of information being relayed to the body, and sometimes when the body gets damaged in certain areas, that fascia wants to web itself down, like the plaid pattern where things just get and then it goes, and once it lays all that down, it's really hard for it to kind of change the movement of it to get it back to what the original movement should have been. Then you also have to maybe manually change the actual tissue itself in that specific area, and then reintegrate the entire muscle. Once we understand how to hydrate it through certain types of foods or certain type of activities or movement, really challenges that and pushes that. There's a multitude of things, and when fat gets kind of pushed in between these things, you end up with these little nodules of fat, and then they build up in the fascia, and then they get stuck there. So that is fascia in a very simplified term. how does this apply to everybody? When it comes to understanding how to release fascia, I would say a myofascial release would simply be, if I were to do, for example, if I had forearm pain or hand pain, this is a simple way to understand this so that you can take this to every other part of the body and use it and become a myofascial release therapist to yourself and maybe your friends and family. So if I'm here and this movement hurts, me extending my wrist hurts. So if me extending my wrist hurts, what do you think is happening with this whole area? If that hurts, why would that be hurting? Well, this tissue right here on this side of the forearm and hand does not want this wrist to go that way, so it's kind of pulling and tugging. So every time I pull open like that, it's tugging and it's shooting a pain signal because it's like, I don't want to go that far. You ever sprain an ankle, you know what that feels like. You ever torch your neck and try to turn your head, you know what that feels like. So to address that myofascially, because that pull is actually a conformity of tissue. It's like trying to help you adapt to something that maybe you've been doing this a lot. Maybe somebody's been writing a lot. Not that your hand is like this when you're right. Like whatever you're doing that's always having this hand like this, whether you're typing or you're being a T-Rex or whatever, that's gonna conform to that spot. So then when you try to go like that, it's not gonna work. Hence why you have a lot of low back pain. People are like this all the time. They have the neck pain, so every time they try to straighten out their neck, they cause that, create that tension gets created. The concept of tensegrity is like every action creates an equal and opposite reaction to a certain spot, and everything is kind of dependent on each other. So if I push onto this one gets pushed a little bit. If I push onto this one, this one gets pushed on a little bit. I know that was kind of off topic, but you get the idea of tensegrity, which is another word that I'm going to be using a lot. This would be a myofascial release. So if I shorten the muscle, for example, and I pushed into the tissue, if I pushed into that tissue and I glided almost away from the direction, like I'm going away from the direction a little bit, that right there, and then I'm allowing the tissue to move, or I'm allowing the actual thumb to move while I'm moving the limb, and the thumb is moving automatically, like by itself kind of, without lotion, by the way. Do not lose lotion for myofascial release, because what you're trying to do is create a shear effect. You're trying to create this, so if here's the tissue, and it's really hard for this tissue to actually be pliable and move together, you really want that tissue to separate, because every time it's moving like this. You don't want it to move together. You want it to be able to slide away and then slide back. This is how the motion becomes lotion, right? That movement is like very easy to move and everything becomes super mobile. When somebody's not mobile, things are stuck. You do too much hypertrophy exercises, too much one specific movement in one specific area, that tissue is just going to lock up and get drier and drier with itself because it's trying to condense itself to itself. So that, if that made any sense, if that is the issue, then I usually compress. Now imagine this part of this is like a forearm or a fist or a hand or something, and I'm pushing into that, then I create the movement underneath. This is the limb. I create the movement underneath it and it shears away from itself, and then finally it kind of creates that separation, and then when you go back to more normal movement, it actually moves properly. That's myofascial release. So hear it again. I'm going to push into it, open it, push into it, open it, and push into it, open it. And myofascial release is done really slowly and really with a relative deep pressure. You want to go at about a 45-degree angle. You don't want to push into it. Okay, 45-degree angle, go that way. 45-degree angle, go that way. Okay, that's a very basic way to do that. I can actually show a full video of how I would like do a myofascial release on a, let's say, a QL muscle or quadratus lumborum, like a low back muscle. So that being said, I've kind of rambled on about a bunch of stuff.